What transpires as police officers attempt to violently remove an unidentified black man from his vehicle. Unfortunately, they find out about his status as a federal agent much after it was already too late. The portion of Broad Street in Vienna, Virginia, leading to the Shell station was unremarkable. Just after noon, there was very minimal traffic near business buildings, a strip mall, and a car wash 2 blocks away. Agent Malik Rowland came into the parking lot during a noon lull, which caused everything to feel like it was halted for a minute. Just like any other driver, his black Ford Fusion lacked any distinguishing features, such as antennae or tinted windows. For the last 11 years, he has been employed as a field operative with the FBI's DC Violent Crimes Division. He sported a pair of worn-out Nike jackets, gray hoodies, and jeans, and he'd mastered the art of the low-key motion. Taking a break for lunch, he was still wearing his badge. He stepped into the store, carrying his Glock concealed behind the seat, just in case, retrieved a protein bar and water bottle, returned to his car after making a kind gesture towards a cashier. All right, he settled onto the armchair, left the door ajar, and relaxed while reading a message from his boss. About a current probe into Rico, he quickly scribbled a response before he discovered there, slowly approaching from behind, a black and white cruiser came into view, followed by another. The parking lot wasn't even full, yet they'd parked close, boxing him in. There were only flashing lights, no sirens. 2 white cops got out, one on either side of the vehicle. One wore aviator, sunglasses, and had close-cropped blonde hair in the late 30s or early 40s. A hot flush crept across the neck of the other officer, Colton Rusk, who was taller and wearier in form. Officer Easton Frey appeared prepared rather than inquisitive. While Rusk gestured towards the vehicle, as if summoning a suspect, Malik put down his phone and waited. He didn't say anything, merely that you reside in the area. Malik maintained his composure. I was simply having lunch, and everything was okay. I didn't inquire as to your whereabouts, but Frey did ask whether you lived in the area. The badge that Malik was wearing, which was partially visible at his waist, read him a federal agent with the FBI. He stated without embellishment that you must see it is located here. Frey frowned at them and said, Blaze or not, you're parked in a suspicious manner, but they did nothing to grab it. As I sat in my car, texting and people watching, Malik blinked and saw it was a petrol station. He got out. I'm reminding you, Malik didn't influence you. I'm a federal agent. You can exit or we'll drag you out. His speech was calm and collected, as if he had previously planned this. Are you sure you want to pursue that path? My name is Malik Rowland, and I checked with dispatch, but they failed to verify my badge number. They skipped a radio transmission and instead had Rusk approach the door, saying, The decision is yours, Malik said, his hand silently lowering to his lap as he inhaled through his nostrils. With the push of a single button, it began dialing, and they failed to see Frey's approach. This is getting out of hand, Malik, and you have no idea what you're doing. As you slack off, although I am not now armed, I do have rights and a badge that surpass yours. Furthermore, I am not resisting and am not a suspect. After 3 rings, someone answered his phone. A teenage girl across the lot interrupted Rusk just as he was reaching for the door handle, as if he had heard enough. Her phone began to record, and a man in a Toyota SUV peered out the window. I still don't know. All I feel is stress. Frey glared at the spectator, saying, He claims to be from the FBI. Are you sure you want to do this? Malik should remain out of it. At the petrol station on Broad Street, 2 people are pressuring me. Rowland, Malik spoke gently, suggesting that they may roll a unit if they weren't listening. In the meantime, Rusk continued to pull at the handle. Now that you know the door was locked, you're obstructing an inquiry, he growled, and Malik remained silent. But it was almost there. What precisely are you looking into? Neither of them paused to consider, nor did they take a breath. However, an unassuming black Suburban had abruptly turned into the lot across the street. However, the situation was far from finished, and things were going to change rapidly. The clenched jaw of Officer Easton Frey was a sign of his growing frustration, not a lack of attention. That wasn't the norm for these Nobody spoke out, nobody remained composed, and nobody spoke a single badge number. Seemingly intending to convey some significance, Frey spoke to his buddy in a tone audible only to Rusk. Rusk agreed, his hand still dangling over his holster as he tries to seem smooth while hesitating. You keep an eye on his hands, and I'll grab the door. Malik remained still as the focus shifted from process to control. He might have yelled out names or acted frantically, but instead he was calculating. He could have shamed them both by flaunting his credentials on a government radio channel, but their expressions prevented him from doing so. He was informed that it wouldn't matter because they had already written the article. He was aware of the expression, the kind that determined your identity prior to your words. I'm inquiring once again, Malik said. Please contact your supervisor. I am not impeding anything. And his voice remained steady. Who needs weapons when you can just shout FBI and you're good to go? According to protocol, Rusk believes I am treated more humanely, and he yelled at me for it. The girl who was photographing them, according to Malik, had moved in closer. She was visibly anxious and had her phone out. I noticed that he had previously shown them his badge. Are they within their rights to do this? As soon as she waited for a response, Malik could feel a subtle but undeniable shift. Frey fumbled with the lock of his baton. Rusk leaned in towards the vehicle, his jaw tensed. Malik was all too familiar with the plot. This became more than simply a stop it, became a headline, so he spoke up once more. With only one misstep, I am being threatened despite identifying myself. Yet I remain cool and measured. He regarded the girl recording as I remained motionless. I had requested a supervisor and was participating. At this point, Officer Frey lost patience and reached in through the partially open window. Could you possibly keep that going? I am not fighting back, as Malik drew back just out of my grasp. As I tried to open the door from the inside, he had already removed the baton from his belt. Malik peered over and spotted this. I've done nothing illegal, and he kept saying, you don't have a warrant or cause. However, Rusk paid no attention, and just like that, the SUV rolled onto the property without making a squeaky wheel or grand entry. The black Suburban came to a complete halt as the authorities exercised precise control. No tinted windows, no government plates, and around 10 feet distant, as soon as the doors swung open, Special Agent Renee Harlow came out, ensuring that federal shields could not mistake them. Nodding towards Harlow to express his gratitude, an erect, slender woman in her mid to late 50s wearing a black jacket over a navy turtleneck, her eyes swiftly assessing him. As she tried to defuse the situation without escalating it, Rusk appeared prepared to dispute. Her short, salt-and-pepper hair was tousled back, and 2 other agents trailed after her, each carrying their own weight. Both men and women were already making their way to Malika's vehicle when Rusk and Frey stopped moving. Then, Harlow's voice pierced through the air as if issuing a drill sergeant's order. Get out of the car now instead. She glanced over at the agents stationed behind her. Excuse me, Frey, but you're meddling with a federal operation. I told you to back off. The agents flawlessly displayed their credentials. Upon unlocking his door, Malik cautiously went out, and the girl who had been filming chimed in once again. The atmosphere around the petrol station took on an oppressive quality, as if it were constricting in on itself. I'm fine, Malik said as she questioned. Frey glanced between them, perplexed, and Freya retreated half a step. She had understood everything. Harlow didn't respond. Take control of the situation, begin filming, and get dispatched. You chose to disregard a government badge and declined to verify it, but Harlow was having none of it. You continued to remain here instead of walking back after threatening an agent during his break. What part of this do you not understand? Everything from his claim to being an FBI agent to their attempt to remove him was captured on tape, but nobody was yelling or intervening. You avoided me due to a gang report. Malik nodded slightly in agreement. Arms lifted, not in capitulation but in uncertainty, self-assurance, dwindling. Instead, assuming that the words struck a chord, not due to their volume, but to their authenticity. It was obvious that this was not going to be handled gently anymore, as Rusk mumbled something under his breath. Although the actual storm hadn't even begun yet, numerous people were already observing, and the local chief was just a short distance away, with a few more passers-by pausing close by. People were now attentively observing. Phone calls revealed Malik's uneasy emotions as he stood outside, arms folded, next to his car. His body language was calm and collected, yet he maintained eye contact with Officer Frey, who appeared to be waiting for something. In order to defend his recent actions, Special Agent Renee Harlow showed no signs of hesitation. She moved with the deliberate pace of an educator who was going to administer punishment rather than counsel. She explicitly said that Agent Roland was on vacation, and he had proper identification. Thus, he did not constitute a threat. It is not mistaken identity that you sought to forcefully remove him after trying to force access into his vehicle. It appears that Frey was acting suspiciously and defensively, which is considered misbehavior. Are you saying that she inquired with a deadpan tone while texting with one of the agents in the car behind her? Thursday wasn't when Rusk was considering backing off, so it's not suspicious. There have been allegations of gang activity in the neighborhood, and it seems like we're going to disregard the automobiles that have been sitting for too long. Then Malik spoke forward, his voice low but fierce, saying, he mentioned that you came across a black man wearing a hoodie in an upstanding neighborhood and resolved to do something about it. You failed to inquire. Rusk remained silent as his pupils widened, but Malik said, I've arrested men in this state. Despite facing 20-count indictments, I have bravely navigated into trap homes at 2 in the morning, armed only with a vest and my companion. And the lack of respect I received while standing outside this petrol station was the lowest point of my life. Then a fresh voice broke the awkward pause. Clutching a granola bar that had fallen to the ground, a translucent windowed silver Ford Explorer drew up alongside the suburban street. Despite the absence of any alarms, the door swung wide, and Chief Grant hadn't emerged. His khaki suit, white hair styled in a flat top, and the expression on his face betraying the fact that he had just been summoned from a funeral at first. He remained silent as he observed Frey and Rusk, all the while attempting to project an air of firmness. Agents surround Malik while Harlow waits with her arms crossed over her chest, hoping someone would explain what the fuck happened. In a solemn tone, Hagen demanded a response. However, before anybody could respond, Harlow moved to make way for the adolescent. Nearby filming continued, and she managed to get the most of it. Agent Rowland provided many verbal identifications. Hagen went to Malik and said, "Are you okay?" as they disregarded everyone else and tried a physical extraction. Malik said, "I am now, but I will not sweep this under the rug." The chief nodded as if he anticipated it. Rusk made an effort to respond, but was ultimately unsuccessful, after which he faced his colleagues, telling Frey Rusk, "Please, sit in your car." They weren't moving quickly. Chief, Hagen shouted at me for stuttering and told me to sit down. Malik, however, walked closer to the chief and spoke softly enough for the agents to hear him. "I am not here to put on a show, but I am also not going to let this pass either, so please, look away. Spectators, if I had made the slightest mistake, they may have publicly humiliated me by pulling me from my vehicle." By this point, Chief Hagen's face had changed from defensive to something else entirely. Exhaustion or shame. "I understand. He warned me that you would be filing a report, and I have already contacted him." While pointing towards the adolescent, Malik stated, "The internals are going to want the body cam footage." Additionally, the agents were already compiling the identities of passersby when an unforeseen event occurred. An older woman, Marcia Tillman, emerged from the store's cash register. As she carefully made her way up, her apron still affixed, she spoke to no one in particular, saying, "I know y'all don't need more noise. I witnessed the entire incident unfolding from my window. He was completely innocent, and, in case you want an explanation, they were acting inappropriately." Malik gave her a thankful expression and thanked her for nodding once. He would give her one, "Keep it out of their hands." But Malik had no intention of keeping anything hidden, especially now that something had been exposed, and the black Suburban hadn't cooled down enough to stuff it back down. Engine was still running as Agent Harlow withdrew her phone from her jacket pocket and took a step back. She remained silent as she strode a short distance away and discreetly dialed a number. Occasionally, she would look across at Malik, but her expression remained inscrutable, not because he was exhausted, but because this whole event had become strange. Malik leaned against his vehicle. He had not raised his voice, refused to resist, or pulled his weapon. But here they stood, clustered among agents in uniform and unidentified bystanders. Seeing the head of police attempting to put out a blaze that had gotten wind, his mind racing with thoughts of the moment, he had pressed call. That particular number had been used just once previously, when he was mistaken for a suspect by a D-task group. When we were in Baltimore 2 years ago, the confusion quickly faded. Agent Harlow retraced his steps towards him, this time with an air of suspicion that it wouldn't. She moved with purpose, but her voice lacked conviction as she talked. "Field oversight is en route from Washington, D.C. According to her, recordings on current issues are already making the rounds on local feeds." "You okay?" "I'm not angry," he said, "but not in the way you think. By sunset, this may have gone national, but they'll do their best to contain it." Malik showed no fear. For a brief while, Harlow fixed her gaze on him. "It's frustrating because every time I anticipate the badge speaking first, it's usually the hoodie that gets noticed." He nodded once, and she didn't dispute his points. "I knew," she replied. "You did everything right." Then turned to face the group of spectators. One of them was a young father whose children were still in the booster seats. A middle-aged couple, embracing. The youngster whose phone was still filming everyone there, had witnessed the buildup of tension and the exact moment it tipped. I had already tagged the reporter from Channel 5 on Twitter. Malik softly asked the adolescent, "What's your name?" Jasmine was the name she gave him. "Jasmine Boyd mentioned that someone from our team would contact you later today. If you would mind holding on to that footage." She gave a little bewildered nod before saying, "Sure, I'll send it." Chief Hagen re-emerged, his hand firmly gripping a hefty Even though the story didn't break in this period, it leaked, streamed, and trended. So naturally, they messaged me about it, just as the departments were about to compose a statement. Fastened to his belt, his former barking voice has transformed into a damage controlling one. He informed Malik that they would require a formal complaint. "I will submit it," Malik said. "I am on the line with internal. Nonetheless, I would want a written response from your department before the end of the day, along with copies of the body cam footage and the unredacted." "You'll be okay," Malik promised, "because I'm not going to let this one go." The chief glanced across at Harlow from behind a closed door, as if he were looking for a professional barrier. "We totally support Harlow's findings and will be doing a similar review," but he did not take any action. A member of the agency, Cam Diaz, was about to say something that would have a significant impact. Emerged from the fringe of the lot stocky and in his early 40s, with a Boston accent thick enough to slice. "I've already had 5 witness stories with a clipboard full of names and statements. 2 witnesses, according to Cam, saw the cops approach him, and 1 heard him identify himself. The entire incident is captured on video by the girl. After asking Malik if he wanted to stand aside and let us handle this, he passed the document to Harlow, who quickly glanced over it. I would have stayed in there if I had been someone else. Malik shook his head. A person without a badge, perhaps. Harlow remained silent when a voice from behind them intervened, stating, "This ends much worse. I apologize for interrupting Jasmine, but I've never met somebody so composed. You displayed no signs of fear or yelling in that terrifying scenario." In response to my fears, Malik looked across at her and stated, "I simply couldn't afford to show it." He looked across at the agents as a moment of silence fell upon him as the phrase echoed through the room. A distinction exists between complying and surrendering, as the audience and the cops continue to sit uncomfortably in their cruisers. I granted their second request, but with the portion that would tremble the town and beyond, I withheld the first. Was only getting going when rumors started circulating. Videos went viral, and someone on the upper floor started to feel anxious. The petrol station had become more than simply a crime scene by the time the second black SUV pulled up. With the deft accuracy of a master driver, the car came up behind the Suburban, conveying a message. One of Supervisory Special Agent Yvonne Trask's well-known accomplishments inside the agency was her ability to mediate high-pressure disputes in a way that avoided negative publicity. Disapproving of ineptitude, she ignored the gathering throng and continued on her way, skirted the local chief and rushed straight for Agent Harlow, who she promptly queried, "What's the temperature?" When Harlow handed her the witness testimonies, her voice low but forceful, her demeanor public but steady. "We have video evidence, complete identification, verification, and 2 cops on standby." Roland remains composed, but he is not backing down. Trask flipped the clipboard to see how much time had passed since the event, and he shouldn't have. All 3 Frey would be yours, if a civilian, honest Trask met his eyes. Rusk, who remained seated in the cruiser, observed the events unfolding with apparent unease. As Rusk appeared on the verge of vomiting, Frey remained still and fixed on the dashboard. "You know what continues to annoy me, Malik?" Trask waited, and they didn't give a hoot about who I was. They be spared the trouble since a fresh voice joined the circle and recorded the incident using body cam footage. The group confronted local investigator Brian Wessler, and I'd like to view the film of that confrontation. Wessler, who had arrived at the scene with the Internal Review Unit, had a reputation for cleanliness in Vienna. Meticulous, and he certainly was unlike the kind to turn a blind eye when a uniform stepped over the queue. He approached with a tablet, its red REC emblem flashing in the upper right corner. Officer Frey granted me access to his body cam footage, and I planned to use it. With a nod from Trask, Wessler tapped the screen, and footage from Frey's point of view aired. Vague but discernible. Malik was seated serenely in his vehicle. Upon initial contact, the ID badge is visible. Despite repeated warnings, Malik has persisted in trying to unlock the door, despite threats, and the entire affair lasted around 5 minutes. But each second was more devastating than the last. There was a little hush when the video concluded before Wessler spoke out. He didn't think twice about it. Agent Cam Diaz had returned with news. There will be local reporters camped outside the precinct within the next 2 hours. According to public affairs officials in Washington, D.C., you were just addressed by name on Channel 9, and Malik Harlow arched an eyebrow in response. Diaz stated that he was presumably recognized by someone in the audience from the 6 Minutes piece on the narcotics raid in Trenton. It wasn't a joke, but the touch of dry humor made Malik sigh and think, "Guess I'm trending now." Trask placed a hand on his shoulder for a moment, which helped alleviate the tightness in his chest. "As long as you're willing to speak up, we'll support you," he nodded. "You'll be responsible for handling the internal matters. I will speak, but not for the benefit of the headline-seeking children without badges who are watching. For those who, at the risk of losing their composure after the first 30 seconds, felt the need to speak up because the outcome isn't always under your control, put an end to the conflict that may ruin careers, surprise everyone by shaking up ministries and changing public trust in ways anyone anticipated an hour later. They reconvened in the windowless rear office of the Vienna Police Department. Not more than a circular table, a water cooler, and a wall plaque commemorating 30 years of community collaboration. It seemed more like a location to restrict consequences than a venue for justice. With a new expression on his face since the petrol station, Chief Grant Hayden sat tensely at the table. Agent Trask sat across from him, fatigued and less defensive than before. Agents Malik and Harlow surrounded him. A civilian liaison from the Department of Justice took notes silently in the corner, while the local town attorney took a seat. Officers Frey and Rusk, who appeared as innocent as children, arrived with their arms crossed. Brought to the principal's office, however, they no longer possessed the vitality that had previously characterized them. All was stillness in the room, as Trask retrieved a folder and set it on the center table. Two uncut body cameras, social media, post screenshots, and 3 witness statements alongside Agent Harlow's documented timeline, no speculation, no guesswork. Chief Hagen reviewed the page above Jasmine Boyd's statement before speaking. As Trask said, he just presented the facts. The witness, a youngster, had vividly described a man wearing a badge, remaining composed while being threatened. "I don't want a show trial," Malik said as he leaned forward ever so slowly. For the first time, Frey came out, saying, "I want accountability, not a publicity stunt. We didn't know who you were." Malik quickly fired back, his voice quivering slightly. "My badge number was even mentioned twice, and you seemed to disregard both of my warnings. Crime rises have been reported in that region," as Rusk said defensively, "and that's why it's okay to force oneself into a car without a reason." Harlow inquired Sharon, "When did you make the radio call?" "Follow that routine for verbal commands and check in with dispatch." "Gentlemen, why did you choose to ignore the DOJ liaison's repeated requests for an explanation?" Verification of the identification of Agent Rowland caused Rusk to pause. He glanced. Malik just gazed at him, his eyes fixed on him. "I mean, he wasn't exactly dressed like an agent. I was wearing a sweatshirt. So you probably felt I was suspect," Malik continued. "Being profiled while sitting in my vehicle with license plates from other counties, I won't defend ill judgment, but we must approach this delicately." Chief Hager wiped his brow and moaned. People are already fuming because Trask didn't back down, which, seriously, means that there are 2 cops on the scene who disregarded many warnings, violated protocol, and escalated an incident that had no business beginning. The town attorney made it plain that this is not going to be handled lightly if it get out of hand. If the department's reputation takes a hit, maybe it should investigate the causes of its fragility. "Malik," remarked Hagan, "you're angry," while being careful not to raise his voice. "I understand that my feelings are not anger, but disappointment. After all, I have 20 years of experience to draw from." No matter how careful we were, the button was still pulled, and Frey shifted in his chair. "Our only concern was ensuring the safety of the environment. Harlow pointed out that you were attempting to maintain composure, but you completely lost it the second you stopped paying attention. I want a public apology with no spin from Malik and disciplinary consequences." So he slid the folder over the table to Hayden. "Rather than retraining, actual responsibility that corresponds to the infractions. After following up with Trask, we have decided to send this case and all future ones to the Civil Rights Division. Hagen, this isn't a unique incident. Your department's stop and search policies need a thorough evaluation." Seemed as though someone had slammed concrete down his throat. As he cast a quick glance at Rusk and Frey, Hagen assured him that they would work together in due time, but that I would need at least 48 hours before making any announcements to the public. "I don't need anyone fired." Malik jumped up and responded, "You've got 24 Trask, but if we keep quiet about what transpired, it will happen again. That's beyond the issue." And the rest came after him. Perhaps someone doesn't want to go. He was the first to exit the room, while Cam Diaz was coordinating a small team of operatives to obstruct the entry. Reporters were already stationed there. No camera could capture Malik's expression as he continued to stare up into the sky, but the story had spread beyond him, and was now a topic in neighborhood gatherings. While others walked restlessly, his hands remained clenched, but no one actually thought they were guiding anything. Videos that went viral, letters sent by advocacy groups, and then the public. All of the folding chairs were occupied that evening at the Jam-Packed Community Center off Cedar Lane. As they stood with their arms crossed, some people were silent. As the room swarmed with activity, news vans crowded the walkway outside. He waited for the silence to subside before clearing his throat. His presence wasn't overbearing, but it was noticeable. The municipal council convened the emergency forum, not with clamor, but with anticipation, attempting to get an advantage over the issue only hours before, with millions of views and counting. The video featuring Officer Frey's statement had already gone viral. On the front row sat Malik Rowland, who was now a popular soundbite. Whether or not you're suspicious, he sported an identical gray hoodie, regardless of whether he was dressed formally or casually, simply acknowledging his presence. On purpose, he roared at the petrol station. As Chief Grant Hayden approached the platform, several glanced in his direction. Some nodded in agreement, while others stood still. At around 7 o'clock in the evening, regardless, he proceeded with it, nonetheless. I am aware that tensions are high, and I will not squander anyone's time. Act like it's not a big deal. No cheers. Just listen. What transpired yesterday was a decision-making gaffe with potentially catastrophic results. 2 of my officers did not correctly identify a federal agent, which is a violation of department practice, saying, "Agent Rowland, I want to apologize to you directly." Disregarded his several attempts to clarify the problem and instead made things worse when they need have been. The audience remained still. As Hagen pressed, both policemen have been put on administrative leave without pay immediately. While an inquiry is underway, taking his time not to shake the chief's hand. At this point, the applause and cries of "why weren't they fired" began, so he didn't have to. Yet the most draining aspect of my occupation, I feel like an outsider in this. We are completely collaborating with the DOJ and the FBI. What about the accusations Hagen raised? I just want to clarify that we will not defend misbehavior, even though this matter has gone outside our department. One man from the rear raised his voice to remind Malik that he had not raised his voice previously. Under the coroner's flag, Jasmine Boyd steadied her phone, but rather into the reasons behind his initial treatment. But we also necessitate more fruitful dialogues. Then it will all be for naught. Malik sat back down in the room, his words still reverberating. Chief Hagen remained quietly at his side, broadcasting the entire thing live from the petrol station. Her footage had already gone viral. Hagen took a deep breath, and then something out of the ordinary occurred tonight. She was even wearing a sweatshirt. Leaving the podium, he approached Malik in a slow, unstaged fashion. Malik quietly thanked everyone in the parking lot, confirming that it had been real. Just a few yards ahead, he halted and spoke into the microphone. But sincere, and Jasmine ceased her live streaming to simply listen, for the simple reason that we let you down as a citizen, as well as an agent. Quiet conversation filled the room as Malik rose to his feet. It's not all about me, though. He nodded once. I value his remarks. But it happened in school halls, at job interviews, and with the unseen weight that individuals carried. Lucked out since I had the badge, backup number, and phone. But what happens to those who don't? While others in the audience nodded in agreement. I've spent my career working cases involving the arrest of dangerous individuals, where I've witnessed the worst side of human nature. Hit me like a ton of bricks when I said, peering into the weary, furious, but attentive eyes of the throng, he listened. We continue to strive for a solution through rules and trainings, but this issue extends beyond enforcement and into the realm of perception. But if individuals persist in relying on gut feelings rather than evidence, not only do we require enhanced screening and accountability, the truthful ones, where the initial inquiry is into his actions. The ovation was moderate. With her phone laying by her side, a neighborhood preacher, a school principal, and the mayor took the stage after them. Opinions began to circulate regarding both Malik and the implementation of traffic stops. It wasn't spectacular. As the meeting came to a close, parents greeted him with handshakes and introduced him to their children, including a young lad of perhaps 12 years old. Malik grinned and responded, "Yeah, for a while now." The boy merely responded, "Cool." Once he and his dad departed, the onlookers were accompanied by more than just thoughts. They were also filled with transformation does not begin with solutions. Rather, it begins when individuals cease to turn a blind eye. More than simply headlines, the town of Vienna woke up the next morning to phone calls. News, vehicles parked on the outskirts of communities and national news organizations' inboxes bursting at the seams with story requests. It was brought up during checkout by video shop owners, and professors opened the lesson to students by asking, "Did you see that?" Additionally, the situation at the police station was unique. The phones would not cease ringing. A few calls came in from irate locals, while others came in from nearby agencies discreetly inquiring about the severity of the situation. The most concerning aspect, however, was the internal turmoil among officers, who began to doubt their own competence. At the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division in Washington, Leanne Cabrera was seated at a rented desk within the regional FBI office at 9 a.m. Having already begun her review, with a stack of papers at her side, and an expression that suggested this was her first rodeo in terms of tidying up the department's messes, she took a quick look at a photo of Malik that was attached to the top of the file. The lads had received 2 commendations. During his lunch break, she shouted this out loud to no one in particular. Officer Colton Rusk sat in a vacant break room, while the Vienna Police Department had unusually low activity. Ignoring his coffee, he remained silent, and no one would utter a word. And it wasn't because they despised him. He looked through his phone, hoping to find anything to say, but instead saw that someone had cut a segment of the video, where Malik composedly distinguished between giving in and surrender. The video went viral with over 2 million views, and the comment area was absolutely nuts. Officer Frey appeared exhausted and calmer when he met with internal affairs in a private area. more like a person who has lost something important but isn't sure what their behavior represents. The investigator questioned Frey about the correct application of judgment, but he took a while to respond. In the local high school, he finally mumbled something about how little it was, but how honest it was. A history teacher showed the video to a class of juniors and then asked, "What do you think would have happened if ... He be incarcerated if he weren't an agent?" she inquired, and one student raised their hand. "It's strange." Someone more joined in, or much worse, a female from the background shouted up, her voice slightly trembling. "I used to think that kind of thing only happened in larger cities, like in the FBI offices in Washington, D.C., and I pass that petrol station all the time. I'll speak for myself without scripts," he said. The coordinator seemed hesitant, while reviewing the content of a press release that had been requested for his approval. Malik sat across from a public affairs coordinator. He glanced at the screen and then brushed it aside. Malik remarked, "Are you sure? It's pointless for me to speak if I'm not honest." Later that day, he held a short news conference while wearing little more than a long-sleeved black shirt. The same composed voice that had first subdued the commotion, and Gene C. informed the cameras at Vienna Town Hall at the week's end of that, not all police personnel are terrible, was seeing unprecedented levels of foot traffic, according to a notice placed on the community board. Open forum on race perception in public safety policing. Anyone can drop by, no need to call ahead or schedule a talk. Initially, there was complete silence, with only a central microphone and rows of seats. As individuals made their way in, a few exchanged sidelong glances, and no one made a beeline for the microphone. Suddenly, Charlene Duper, a lady in her 70s, rose to her feet. She walked with a cane, but her confident voice rang out. She mentioned that I've lived in this town for 52 years and have witnessed its transformation from countryside to 4-lane motorway. Then I'll fill you in on the agent's fate, something that wasn't quite fresh, but was documented. A mechanic named Lamar Denton, who owned a little garage just 2 blocks away from the petrol station, arrived after a few heads nodded and murmured. He mentioned that I'm not a police officer, but I understand the feeling of having someone stare at you. On several occasions, I have been pursued through this town, and I perceive a danger. The stories came out one by one, and not everyone was furious. Others were simply exhausted. Not once did anybody ever apologize, because I'm afraid someone could look at my kid inappropriately. I warned him not to wear his hoodie to bed. As one woman towards the back of the room said, this prejudice doesn't necessarily stem from bigotry. As a white guy called Joe Mathers, who is a former police, pointed out, the fact that we were never compelled to analyze our behaviors is a problem, not an excuse. Truth was spoken instead of screaming contests or ranting as the room transformed. Somebody then saw that Malik had sneaked in, seated near the side wall, far from the front rows. Although he first intended to remain silent, he was finally identified by someone. All eyes were on him as Malik rose to his feet in a dignified and subdued manner. He approached the microphone and cleared his throat, saying, "I am not here to make this about me." He halted, searching the crowd since according to him, it's more than just 1 or 2 stops. I've seen firsthand how quickly someone can be taught a trade, and I've also had the opportunity to work with some of the nation's top police teams. Perceiving peril when none exists, fresh catchphrases and seminars will not resolve this. Our solution is to speak and listen honestly, even when it hurts. As Malik went on, someone in the front row said, "That's it, right there." What transpired was far from the worst thing that might have occurred to me. I was fortunate that I did not wind up in a hospital. Not only was I not locked up, but I was also treated like an outsider. If that can happen to me, then what? What happens when one agent has the necessary qualifications and training, but the next one doesn't? Still feeling the weight of the room, Malik cast a sidelong glance at the town mayor, who sat serenely in the second row. First to the head of the school, and then to the assembled assembly. I do not like to see any offices leveled, and I want departments restored. Accountability, not vengeance, is what I want. I do want children to learn that staying silent is a prerequisite for being safe in this community. Thereafter, genuine applause in it, crazy or showy when they're terrified. An open Google form was created by a group of local students who formed a student alliance called Vienna Youth Watch, located in an area where citizens might report incidents with police, whether positive or negative. By morning, hundreds had filled it out, and the town council decided to start holding forums every month. They further committed to examining their methods of assessing, recruiting for positions within the local police department, and Malik returned to his job incognito, skipping any public appearances or book sales. He was wearing the identical Ford Fusion, with the same insignia fastened to his belt and the identical sweatshirt tucked under his back seat. However, his surroundings underwent a transformation. Upon seeing him, cops dropped their windows, and people began to meet him at petrol stations. He felt a familiar human scenario one day, not because he was renowned, where he found an audience that wasn't ignoring him. As he and his buddies were leaving school, Jasmine Boyd caught sight of him, waved, and continued on her way. or are somewhat engrossed in their phones. Although he didn't reciprocate the wave, he grinned and kept on. Jasmine was merely one of many who had before been oblivious, and at that instant, transformed into a reflection. Have any of you ever been judged before you even opened your mouth? Nearly every hand shot up in response. After 3 weeks of waiting, Malik finally made it to a gymnasium. James Monroe High School in Fairfax was packed with teenagers, their rows of seats arranged crosswise on the stands. Now, how many of you have passed judgment on another person before? Some people are talking quietly, chewing gum. Nonetheless, Malik's simple black polo pants and trainers were a distraction when he took the microphone. Followed my training, talked quietly, and used the correct terminology. His posture, as if he were someone with something to say, took center stage rather than his clothing. And without relying on any PowerPoint slides, he skipped over the background information. He began by asking, varying speeds, some reluctant and others quick. Malik nodded. A handful raised their hands and remained while others joined them in speaking. Truthful individuals, he claimed. That is the starting point, that chasm between our knowledge and our assumptions. Malik, but being afraid doesn't make you weak. He recounted the event, but he kept it simple, without trying to make it seem dramatic. Or rather, when you believe no one is looking. Nothing mattered at first, even though I adhered to all the rules that day, he observed as he beheld the multitude of youthful faces. When you want to shout, it's walking away. And there is the crux of the matter. When trust is broken, not even doing the right thing can save you. A pall descended over the audience as some educators positioned towards the rear exchanged quizzical looks. They were unprepared for a discourse of this nature. Respect isn't a badge. It's a uniform, Malik said, gesturing to his chest. It's the way you handle people when no one is looking. Standing firm does not need you to be a federal agent. To be heard, you don't need to be flawless. What matters is that you realize your value. A courageous student stood up from the front row, refusing to let fear take it away. You didn't pause because you were afraid. If you care enough to want to survive, it implies you recognize what's at risk. He was young, barely older than some of them. The kid hesitantly nodded, his phone still filming. Malik's face lit up with a tiny smile. When someone is shouting commands at you, it takes fortitude to tell them, I am not a threat. When your heart is racing, it's holding your voice. Calm? Another raised hand. In a repeat incident, would you change anything? Malik appeared contemplative. I would make my voice heard just as loudly. I really shouldn't have to, especially after the chat. But I may as well be a little louder. After shaking his hand, many kids approached it. One inquired about potential FBI membership, while another merely expressed gratitude. Quietly, he listened, nodded, and departed without taking photos or signing autographs. Agent Rene Harlow stood by his car, just as he had done when he entered. There's still national pressure on this, so are you sure you don't want a formal media? You gave people something to ponder about. But without momentum, what good is media? Malik shrugged. Changing is difficult, he remarked. While they stood there, and she answered, thinking is simple. A school resource officer came up to the elderly students. Hey sir, the cop exclaimed to Malik, his face betraying his nervousness. After watching the video, I've been giving a lot of thought to my own demeanor. On that fateful day, I could have been that person, and I vowed to do better. Malik scrutinized his features. Be better, Malik remarked, not to size him up, but to see if he meant it. At the end of each shift, they would shake hands. That night, Malik took the long route home, with no music and no calls. Upon entering his driveway, he lingered in the car for an extra minute. As is his custom, in the rearview mirror, he caught sight of himself a weary but solid guy. Perhaps someone else now regarded him in a new light, though he never considered himself a symbol before. Not due to his circumstances, but to his response to them, as respect isn't given out of thin air. It needs to be earned and then defended. If this tale touched you, then it was worth it. Don't allow discussions like this go into oblivion. If they prompted you to reflect, share them, and do subscribe to the channel so that we may continue to share the tales that others choose to overlook.